Alex, you broke the site.
It's not. This probably isn't the first time. This almost assuredly will not be the last time.
Well, the state of that the quote unquote studio from yesterday, I feel like that infected the rest of the site and just brought the whole thing down.
Yeah, we are a horrible plague upon all things that is Giant Bomb. That is our role now. We are here to infect and destroy everything that has been built up to this point.
That was cool though. That was as busted up as that studio might have been. I'm not even sure it qualifies as a studio yet. It was
It
cool.
is a studio. It is
Well,
it
okay.
is a space in
Mm-hmm.
which is designated for filming.
Uh-huh.
There are cameras in there, and there is equipment, and there's like a green screen curtain and all that shit. It is actually a studio. It's just that we had to kind of break it to make it do what we wanted to do.
Like
So
like Vinny laying on the floor.
yeah, he was getting real sexy on the floor there. People seemed to dig that. I mean, whatever. That stream was basically our equivalent of holding up a newspaper with today's date to let everyone know we were still alive. Like that was our proof of life. We'll probably have another one of those next week. Hopefully by after next week we will actually have all the equipment we need and we will just be in like normal operating shape. But hey, we're getting there.
Quarterly budgets. Quarterly
Yeah,
budgets.
Cap X, motherfuckers.
Really fun corporate stuff. So what do you? We started this show awfully late. We're sorry. You're probably just watching it on YouTube. I don't know how many people are going to get to watch it because the reach is just through my Twitter account, but not the front page of the site. But chat's broken,
Yeah.
so we don't have any way of pointing you to this live stream. But we thought we'd record what we could. Also have a doctor's appointment, so it's a shorter show. It's a total mess this morning. Friday is off to a terrible start. But
I
did
mean,
you?
it's in perfect keeping with the way this week has been going because this
Yeah.
week has just been harrowing and awful.
Yeah. Did you play any video games this
I
week?
played a few. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I started in on Valiant Hearts,
Oh,
which
really?
I'm looking to finish hopefully today and write up because so far I quite like it a lot actually.
How much of a bummer is it?
It's kind of a bummer so far. I'm only 3 chapters in. I think there are 5 total. None of the main characters have died yet, but I mean that seems like it could happen at any moment because
Are
it's a
they,
game about World War One and it's kind of a downer. So that seems
are they
like
gonna kill that dog? Are they gonna kill that dog?
God. I fucking hope not. If they kill that dog, that game gets a 1. Fuck that game. But
Two different scores. Like one score for what the game is, and
yeah.
then another score for why'd they kill the dog.
Yeah, see, I'm glad actually we don't have the chat up right now because I bet someone who has finished that game would just be yelling, "They killed the dog!" And I don't want to know that. I don't want to know that at all. Um, but it's, I like it not just because of the Ubi art stuff, which, always looks pretty phenomenal, and the art style of this game in particular is pretty rad. But there's actually kind of a neat little puzzle game kind of built into it. Like, it's all about sort of navigating these environments. It's not like it's not a shooter, it's not a beat 'em up, but it is a side scroller. And the whole purpose of the game is just trying to figure out your way through these different environments that have like you're trying to if you're playing as the lady character, she's a medic. So whenever she's on camera, she has to rescue people who are injured, in bombings or in various other things. So you have to find ways to get to them, to pull them out of rubble or save them from fucking chlorine gas attacks and shit. Like, it's
Mm,
rough, but at the same time, I think it's kind of artfully rough. Like, it's done in a way that doesn't feel like overly heavy-handed or like just overly frivolous. Because again, trying to make a game out of something like World War One trench warfare that isn't just like a shooter is maybe kind of a difficult thing to conceptualize. But the way they've gone about it, at least in the few hours that I played it, seems really cool.
so that's the line I saw floating around. I'm sure it was from someone's review, but I don't know who to attribute it to necessarily. But they said the line, to paraphrase, was something along the lines of Valiant Hearts is a really great story trapped in a video game.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much you've gotten a sense of, man, this is really cool. It's great that they're trying some new things, but what comes along with that is the realization that, when you tread new ground with, storytelling in video games, you may not necessarily know the best way to express that in a video game.
Yeah, and it has some challenges. Like, it throws in a narrator when it feels like it needs to communicate something very specifically, and sometimes that's done a little awkwardly. There's no actual in-game dialogue. Like, it's sort of like the Rayman approach, where it's a lot of like kind of mumbled utterances, but it is words. You just can't really make them out. They are in the correct languages. Like, you can hear a guy kind of muttering in German or yelling in French or whatever, but like it's sort of hard to really tell what they're trying to say.
Right.
Um, and sometimes, so it's hard to get a real great sense sometimes of like who these characters are. You have to kind of go into the menus and read through the diary entries that you collect to kind of get some of that backstory filled in. So there are things that are awkward about it, and like the first level is just so damn easy that you honestly wonder like, is this just going to be like this for the rest of the game? Because holy shit, I'm barely doing anything. But once you get past those first like that first 45 minutes or so, there's a little bit more to it. It's not a hard game by any stretch. It is not even a super challenging game. It is just sort of, here are these puzzles, these worlds that you kind of have to figure out how to get through. Some of it's a little bit, it takes a few minutes to figure out, but like none of it's that hard.
Are the puzzles like find an item, bring the item? Like, what are we talking about when you say puzzles exactly?
It's like, okay, you have to get from, say, one building to the next building, and there is a big pile of flaming wreckage sort of attached to a wire somewhere that you have to figure out how to get rid of. In order to do that, you have to go down, walk around, go down into a sewer, solve a couple of other small things, which eventually will lead to someone helping you by giving you these bolt cutters, which you can then use to go back and cut the thing and rescue the other person, like that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
And I can start to see how maybe like grafting on a lot of that stuff, which is maybe what we consider the gamey stuff,
Yeah.
maybe could at some point take away from the narrative, or you would just wonder why it's there. It's there
Right.
because a video game needs that stuff.
Yeah, it is awkward at times. Like, I don't think it's perfectly realized by any stretch, but I think it's ambitious in a way that I think is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it's, if I'm comparing it to like other UbiArt games, for instance, like, no, I'm not having as much fun with it, nor am I as excited about it as, say, like either of the Rayman games, but I'm enjoying it a lot more than, say, like Child of Light. I think that it has a much better balance of what.
Or Watch Dogs. Or Watch
Wait, what about Watch Dogs?
You're enjoying it more than Watch Dogs.
I
think
haven't played Watch Dogs yet.
think
Also, not an UbiArt game.
I know, but I'm just like, in terms of the ambition of Watch Dogs, not
Sure.
that interesting. Actually,
No.
not even that ambitious. I'd rather have a million of these UbiArt games that I find like crucially flawed in a bunch of ways, but goddamn, are they interesting?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting experiment. We'll see how it pans out over the last couple of hours, because I think I only have like 2 chapters left, but so far I'm very much enjoying it, and I would, it's a $15 game. Like, I don't feel like that's like a hard investment for anyone. Like, it seems like something worth checking out for that price.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out. I just finished Shovel Knight because I reviewed it for the site, and
How long is that game?
your mileage may vary, and
Okay.
it really depends on your proficiency with these kinds of games. It took me about 6 hours, but I basically blazed right through the game. Like, I
Right. Okay.
had very little difficulty with it, as I pointed out in my review, that I thought the game was a little on the easy side relative to what you expect for these kinds of games. But if I take a more broad perspective, I think people will like Shovel Knight for that. I'm not necessarily saying it was the wrong decision that that game doesn't sort of bust your balls more often than it does, except to say, when I look at a game like that, I expect that it's going to kick my ass way more than Shovel Knight actually did.
Right.
My guess is for most people it'll probably take around 8 hours. That seems to
Okay.
be what it's taken for a lot of folks. But that is another really, really good video game that I forgot was a Kickstarter game.
Yeah, I put like an hour into it yesterday, just to kind of get a sense of it. I downloaded it for Wii U. Yeah, that game is really cool. Like, I really, really like the art style of it. I think that, like you said, it is a really good meshing of the kind of old school sensibilities with kind of a modern design, sort of specification. Like, I think that yeah, like you said, those types of games, they lean on nostalgia so hard all the time. And it is surprising how well, like you said, the controls hold up, and two, just like kind of it does, like, despite using the aesthetics of 8-bit games or 16-bit games, it doesn't just lean on that entirely, which I think is rad. Like,
Well, I think that's what's contributed to this. I think in some ways cynical attitude towards whenever a new game that looks like this is announced. We're
right.
at this point, it's not the gimmick isn't enough anymore. For a while, it was when there was people just doing pixel art or 8-bit art or 16-bit art, like whatever they were trying to pull from, whatever influences they were using as a foundation aesthetically. For a while, that was interesting enough because that was brand new. Now that is not the case. Games have run that into the ground. They have ruined that as something that is charming in and of itself. And I think that's what has led to, you'll see it in the comments and in the review and some of the tweets I've gotten where people are like, oh, I'm just, man, I've played one too many of these and they weren't that interesting. And it's too bad because Shovel Knight is the real deal. Like Shovel Knight, as I say in the intro of my review, like it really does feel like a cartridge pulled out of time, and then we just happen to be playing a ROM dump in 2014. There's a excellent feature up on Gamasutra right now in which the artists over at Yacht Club Games talk about their process in terms of putting together the art for that game, in which their original passes at some of the enemies were too advanced. Then they went back and looked at what was possible with 8-bit technology and then rearranged sort of like the palette and the detail level on their enemies to better reflect what would have been possible on that technology. And that's, again, only an aesthetic thing, but also I think shows the level of detail and the amount of care they're putting into that world. But none of that would matter. It could be poop on a screen as long as it played as well as Shovel Knight does, which it totally does. Like every time you do something in that game, it does exactly what you want to do, including when you die all the time. But you die because you screwed it up, not because you have some Little Big Planet bullshit floaty physics that you can't quite figure out exactly where your character is going to go.
Right.
And like controls in a game are something that we only point out when they're bad. We don't often talk about when they're good. Maybe we'll talk about when they're exceptionally good, like a Super Meat Boy, where you're considerably impressed how much fidelity and control you have over your character. But oftentimes it's just a fault, not something where like, man, this game really nailed being able to go left to right and jump. But man, Shovel Knight nails going left to right and jumping.
Sure does. You wouldn't have known it from the stream yesterday because that was actually probably the first time I'd really put my hands on that game. But spending a little more time with it, like just getting the attack mechanics right and getting that sort of like that shovel bounce right, like that is an incredibly satisfying thing once you get that the feel for that and feel like you can kind of wield that the correct way. Because yesterday when I first picked it up, I was like, I'm gonna wave the shovel around, I'm just gonna hit stuff and see what happens, and I just kept dying, and that's not the way to play that game.
No, but once you kind of get it under your belt, I mean, you can pull off some really miraculous things as you go through the game, and they start setting up these really elaborate traps for you that, again, if the game hadn't nailed how it feels, making it that you feel like you're in complete control, you'd look at those traps and you'd be more frustrated than excited. But when you know that the character is going to do exactly what you want him to do, you actually, look, all right, this is a really fun trap that I'm going to try and make my way through, and if I screw it up, it's going to be completely my fault. And that's how you feel as you go through the arc of playing Shovel Knight, is that by the end, when you've got all this magic power, you've got all this health, and you've really gotten to know the nuance of Shovel Knight's sort of gravity and physics, you can pull off some really crazy things, and they throw some really rad / terrifying stuff at you towards the end of the game that will certainly. It didn't quite cause me to throw a controller, but yeah, some audible sighs were heard, and that game's just. It's really good. Also, it's got music from the split between two composers, but some of them are from the original composer of the Mega Man games. And
oh no shit!
Goddamn, that music is good. Yes,
it is really good. Yeah. That's definitely like the first detail I noticed. Like as soon as I booted, I was like, oh man, this music is super good.
Yeah. So Shovel Knight, good video game. People should play it.
Some good video games out this week.
There are, interesting games. I played Shovel Knight on the Wii U. That's the one I would recommend because the gamepad stuff is actually pretty good, and you end up switching between like 10 plus items towards the end of the game, and just having them readily available on the gamepad is like super nice and convenient. The 3DS version also has that benefit, but it's a smaller screen, and
Right.
it's really nice to see this like 8-bit game but rendered with 2014 technology outputting on a big ass TV. But that's just me. I've also heard the 3D stuff on the 3DS version looks amazing, and obviously the PC may be just something that more people have than
Yeah.
than a Wii U. But if you got the
general.
option, the Wii U seemed to be the place to play it.
Cool. Well, then I'm glad I made my choice. I almost got it on 3DS because I thought maybe with commuting I would want to play it that way, but nah. I'm like you. I just want it on TV.
Just bring your Wii U on the bus with you. Just bring a little portable generator and get it going.
This all sounds perfectly reasonable. This sounds like a great plan. I'm into this.
Did you play anything else this week, or is that
That's pretty much been it. I went through the last of my Retron stuff and have come out with no other cartridges that do not work. So I'm pleased to say that 90% of the old games I own, still work. Now I'm just going to start having to add to that collection like a total psychopath.
Yeah,
but-
I've immediately put the Retron as a, I don't have many things that, like as you get older and people like want to, like Christmas comes around and it's like you get old enough you can kind of get most of the stuff you want for yourself, so Christmas gets like kind of weird. The Retron 5 like is definitely in a camp of I really can't justify buying that for myself, but I'd really like one. So I put that on Amazon wish list. It's like, well, maybe I'll get that solved later this year.
One of these days, mayhaps. It's a cool system. I just updated the firmware on it. I didn't make any drastic changes or anything, but the controller's not great, but it has support for the old ones. It seems to play nearly all the games that I have. Like, I don't know what else you could ask for a sort of bootleg, but kind of professionally made bootleg system like that. That seems like there are maybe a few things you could improve upon it, but it is probably the best realization of one of those types of systems I've seen. So, thumbs up from me.
Sweet. Yeah, I can't think started playing. I played a little more Watch Dogs. Don't have anything to say about that. I'll keep doing that against my better judgment. And I pretty much want to start playing the game you're playing. That's kind of next on my list. Although, I downloaded Dynasty Warriors, the game that will get me fired from Giant Bomb.
Patrick, what are you doing?
I want to know.
What do you want to know? I can just tell you.
Why do people play these games?
Because there is some thing in their brain where the idea of mindless repetition, where you just stab tons of dudes that don't really fight back for the most part, it just hits some strange, malformed piece of the brain in a way that makes that pleasurable to them.
So why? Explain to me this. Why we give sports games a pass for being like barely better iterative franchises that come out every single year because they're sports, I guess. But we give all those games a pass. But Dynasty Warriors, which may as well just be like the Madden of what do they call it?
Stabbing, yes.
The Mosu genre. I forget what they call the genre. But it's basically the same thing. Like, why is Dynasty Warriors the one that we dump on? Or is Dynasty Warriors like the equivalent of like furries in the geek hierarchy, where it's kind of the same thing, but it's the one that everyone just decides to make fun of for whatever reason?
Here's the thing. It's not that I'm making fun of it because it's iterated in that way. Like, lots of games are iterated that way. Like you said, sports games are the same idea. I get that. That is not the issue. The issue is I don't find the act of playing it fun. Like, that is, and I'm making jokes about malformed brains or whatever. It's like, no, it's fine. There is just a segment of people who find what that game does enjoyable, the same way that I find playing football every year sometimes enjoyable. It just doesn't strike me that way at all, because the idea of just running around these environments and stabbing dudes that don't fight back, it don't matter how fucking many of them there are, does not give me any joy. Like, it just doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for a lot of people, except for this very vocal, very dedicated subset of people that fucking love them. And you know what? Good on them. Good on you for finding something that gives you pleasure, that gives you joy, that you like. As much shit as I talk about those games, I hold no actual judgment of anyone for liking something. Just because I think it's dumb doesn't mean it's dumb. I just think it's dumb. I think those games are dumb. The only games in that series I have ever enjoyed are the Empire's offshoots, because those add like a weird like tactical strategy element to the whole thing that gives it some context and makes me think, okay, at least there's something I can latch on to. The regular games just do absolutely nothing for me. That's just me.
I really liked. It might have just been Launch Fever, but was it Kessen? Is that the name of that game? You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
I remember that game. I don't remember anything about that game.
Is that right? Is that Kessen? Am I pulling
That
that
sounds
out?
right.
PS2.
That sounds
Yeah,
correct.
Kessen. It's a real-time tactics video game. I don't know if that means it's a strategy game like Command and Conquer or whatever, but I remember liking that game. That was also made
sure.
by Koei.
I don't think I ever played it.
So look, I might hate Dynasty Warriors. I'm not promising that I'm going to go into this horrible job-destroying adventure and come out with it going, oh, I get it. These people aren't crazy. But I like the idea of trying to go in and figure out like what is appealing about this. It's got to be something beyond just mindlessly hitting the square button. So my job, what I'd like to do, is come out of it understanding what that is. So
this is some cultural anthropology type shit.
Yeah, pretty much.
You should definitely tap Jim Sterling at some point, because I know
don't worry.
He's a huge fan of those games.
Every time I've mentioned like Dynasty Warriors, he's like Candyman. He just sort of appears on Twitter, even though he has not been summoned. If there is someone that has a question about Dynasty Warriors, Jim Sterling is there to answer. So maybe we'll like the end goal of this is for me to play, like between 5 and 10 hours of Dynasty Warriors and then do sort of a video piece on it, kind of like I did with Story About My Uncle earlier this week. But maybe I'll have to do some sort of co-op stream with Jim Sterling, talking to someone that really does like these games a lot.
I think that would make sense. I don't think having me do it would make sense, because the whole time it'd be like, so when do we get to the part that's fun? So when do we get to the part that's fun? Oh, wait, there isn't one. And that's not fun for anybody. So you should find someone who actually enjoys those, and I think Jim would be a perfect choice for that.
That's fun for me, but it may not be fun for everyone else.
Not for an audience. Nobody wants to hear me just bitching about a game I don't like for endlessly. It's like, it's one thing for me to make a joke about it here, but it's like nobody wants to watch me play that game and hate it the whole time. That's not fun.
So maybe we'll do that. Well, let's go into some news. There was some quite a bit of stuff that came out this week. Not a lot of really big news, but a lot of smaller news. The one that caught my eye that was earlier this week. So I never ended up redeeming the PlayStation Now code that I got handed out at E3, but a lot of people have. And one of the things that just changed was the pricing structure, in which you didn't have to pay in order to stream many of the games that were on PlayStation Now as part of the beta period, but now you do have to pay as PlayStation Now inches closer towards its formal launch, at least in North America this summer. Although Sony's been hinting that there'll be some announcements regarding the rollouts for Europe at Gamescom. So I'm pulling from a Kotaku story titled "The PlayStation Now Prices Are Currently Insane," in which, so let's say, for example, Final Fantasy 13-2. On PlayStation Now, you can currently stream it for 4 hours for $4.99, 7 days for $7.99, 30 days for $14.99, or 90 days for $29.99, as the writer Jason Schreier points out, that you can buy the whole game right now on Amazon for $17.
That is a fair point, but what if you don't want? You know what? No, I'm sitting here. I'm trying to form out some reasoning where it makes sense to stream it instead of buying it, but I can't. You're right. That is just weird.
Guacamelee is the other example shown, in which it's 4 hours, $2.99, 7 days, $5.99, 30 days, $7.99, 90 days, $14.99, despite the fact that the game is currently $15 on a PS3. So I think Sony find them, I think, yes, in some level these prices are crazy, although I think if you look at the prices, they're really just trying to push you into that 7-day window.
Right.
Obviously 4 hours is crazy. 90 days, you probably should just go buy the game, although maybe Final Fantasy 13-2, maybe that would make some sense. But $5.99 for 7 days is plenty of time to finish Guacamelee. Like 7 days is plenty of time to finish most games that you're intending to sort of play, for a couple hours each day over the course of the next week. And then at that point, $7.99 for a big RPG like Final Fantasy 13-2, that's pretty good, although it'd probably take you more than 7 days to finish it. Let's take out games that are 60 hours potentially. Those are on a certain spectrum. But like the central question here that Jason brings up, and obviously it looks insane when you look at what you could pay for on Amazon, but Sony's problem is that are these prices supposed to constantly dynamically change based on the changing value of a retail product, which is completely disconnected from the more static nature of digital products?
Right. To me, this feels like a company that is doing something that is wholly unfamiliar to a lot of people. Because, like, the idea of PlayStation Now, like, the idea of streaming games like this, maybe not completely new, but doing it in this format, like, on a console with, like, all these different games, is still kind of a new, uncharted thing. And it doesn't seem like they even really know what it's worth. Like, they are guessing. This feels like a lot of guesses as to what the time frame and the price should be. They may be completely wrong about all of this. I assume that they're just going off focus testing and some market research, being like, what would you pay for something like this? And, in reality, that could turn out to be the exact right numbers or completely the wrong numbers. I would hazard to guess that after 3 months, if this isn't really catching up, those numbers will change. But at this point, it feels like this is just them throwing some stuff out there and being like, hey, so here's what we're starting with. Let's see how this goes. Because, again, they don't exactly have a good framework to work off of. It's not like there's another service out there that does exactly this the way they're doing it that they can just crib from, right? Am I forgetting something that exists out there that is like this?
No, I mean, there are other, been other streaming experimental services, but nothing that's taken off. Like PlayStation Now will be the first big mass market experiment with a technology like this, and then also, having to pay, sort of like hourly rental fees. Like this is completely brand new territory. So, while Jason's headline may be slightly hyperbolic, this is also part of like the give and take with stuff like this. Is Sony will roll out what they think is fair, or maybe they don't, right? Maybe they shoot for the high end and then see, and which would make more sense, right? You would want to charge as much as you can get away with. So, that's how a negotiation works. It wouldn't shock me if Sony is putting up the extreme end of what they want to charge. They kind of gauge how people respond. They can claim it's a beta period. Although I still think it's weird that you charge people during a beta period. Like that's part and parcel with games now. That's just what people do now. I know it's still gross, but it makes sense that they would start there and then move their way down, because if they started cheap, you can't move your way up. People are gonna crucify you. Or you can, but
it's much harder.
Right. So I suspect that we'll see something a little more, between free and this high end, something more in the middle. But I still think it's a really difficult question for them, because that's constantly what's going to happen, is that if you'll see whatever the high end of 90 days, which is basically kind of like, temporary ownership for having it for 3 months. Like, are they just constantly going to get pummeled with, well, hey, I can go get this on Amazon? Like, at what point does Sony say, well, we're just, screw that. That's not the metric we're using, because the degradation of a retail product is completely different than, how things are handled in the digital world, which are dynamic in their own different way.
Right. If you're just looking at it as 90 days of any game for $29.99 seems like a reasonable number, sure. Just putting those two numbers together, that sounds like a reasonable number. It's when you factor in things like Amazon pricing and, like you said, the degradation of pricing across the board for stuff like that, that things get kind of hinky, because that shit isn't universal. Like, you never know how much a game is going to drop or how quickly it's going to drop. It just it's at the whim of the publisher. So them not necessarily trying to adhere to that makes sense. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Jason's headline was a little bit hyperbolic, but at the same time, just looking at those numbers next to each other, you're right, that does look weird. But if you're Sony, you can't sit there and constantly chase after Amazon or whoever else is pricing. You have to try and create some kind of normalcy, like, this is what you pay for this many days of any game. You know, like that is something you have to establish. And the second you start trying to chase after like sale prices or drop prices, like then it just becomes too convoluted and no one's going to care.
Well, and if I think PlayStation Now represents both of these new systems, the PS4 and the Xbox One, especially with Microsoft, whatever you think of Kinect, with them sort of running away from it, they're both kind of boring boxes. They're just better versions of what we've gotten before, whereas PlayStation Now is the kind of stuff that gets me really excited because even if I can't necessarily see myself using a lot of the service right now based on the libraries that they're offering, it's a truly potentially revolutionary service. And that gets me excited about what's possible with next generation technology and like trying to open up what these systems are capable of. But the thing is, it feels like a service like this is better suited for a world where retail has completely died, because that's essentially what is allowing Jason to hammer Sony on this point of Final Fantasy 13-2 being $17 on Amazon. In the truly digital world where retail no longer mattered, prices would go down much slower than they currently do in the dynamic of digital and retail, where there's just a lot more competing factors for prices to go down. Publishers would be much happier if that went down at the rate that, say, Nintendo games go down, which is to say never, ever.
Very little, if at all.
And Nintendo is an exception because their games are just evergreen in a way most other games are not, but I think that the industry would like to trend in that direction, and digital helps them get there because they just have a little more control over the actual pricing, because they're much closer to giving, the distribution methods are much more direct to the consumer. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm curious to see how all of this plays out. For me, honestly, I'm mostly just waiting to see what the subscription service stuff pans out to be. It sort of scares me if these are the prices that they're charging on an individual title basis. What are they possibly thinking about charging for something on a monthly basis? I can't imagine myself wanting to pay more than $7.99 a month.
Yeah.
That might even be on the high end.
Sure.
Because this is going to be an initial library that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot. I'm just assuming based on how libraries usually launch, but I can't imagine myself paying more than $7.99, given that I'm already paying for PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live and stuff like that. So
all that stuff.
We'll see. Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The E3 Games Critic Award nominees are out.
Yeah. Bloodborne did not win anything.
What didn't?
Bloodborne didn't win anything.
Well, it's in the nominee for Best RPG.
Stupid.
I know.
Stupid.
I still don't know how playable that game was. Like, I assumed they had to let some judges put their hands on it if it got into the nominee list.
It was playable.
What's that?
I can confirm that it was playable. I did not play it. I can confirm judges were able to play it, and not in the like BioShock Infinite's version of playable, which was here, move around this room, but you can't do anything. People played Bloodborne.
Yeah. I wrote a thing about it. I made some comments on the awards. A lot of people in the comments of that story, made some points about whether or not E3 awards even should exist at this point, or whether they ever should have existed. Let's just focus on, at this point, and do E3 awards really matter that much? I mean, other than for marketing purposes, not really, in my opinion. It's like, cool, Evolve got nominated for 6 awards, Destiny and Siege both got 4. It's like, there's a best online multiplayer category, which seems like a really problematic thing considering, the state of online games in that situation. I don't know. It's the thing that struck me most about, the GCAs was that it really just felt like all the games that were big that were at the show got nominated for something. And part of that is because there weren't that many games at E3. Which sort of plays back into that whole, does E3 even matter at this point? But just to go to the awards specifically, I'd be curious to know what you think about this stuff, Patrick, because as the years go on, I start to wonder whether these things matter at all anymore.
Yeah, no, I don't think the awards tell us very much. I think awards are useful for sort of sifting through. They're like a curation tool, basically.
Right.
In which folks that have access to seeing all this stuff are able to be a conduit for people that aren't at the show to get a sense of what was worth paying attention to. And that's just increasingly not a thing that consumers need. They have access to seeing a whole lot of what comes out of E3, and oftentimes in a way that is more accessible than what we're getting being at the show itself. And given that there are just fewer and fewer games at E3, generally speaking, it's not like we're really helping people sift through a whole lot in that way. And that, at some point, it feels like the awards are more just perfunctory because, well, that's one of the things you do is you give out awards as opposed to serving as any sort of useful metric.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of publications still do E3 awards of their own, it's why...
We did a couple of years.
Did we?
Sort of. We gave out like a best of show.
Okay. I don't even really remember that, but that sounds like something that might have happened. When did we stop doing that? I'm not sure. That's how much... I really feel like we gave out something to BioShock. Maybe. I don't know. It just, I understand the purpose behind it, but now it just seems, like you said, it seems less useful than ever. And then it leads to situations where you see, trailers saying, like, winner of over 40 E3 awards, but, like, what does that even mean?
That's never meant anything.
Yeah, it's just at some point that number becomes so insane and meaningless that it just negates the purpose they're trying to put there. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I played some good games at E3, but looking at that list, it's like, does there need to be a best strategy category when there are apparently 2 strategy games at E3, period? Like, it feels like they're adhering to a format that no longer fits the situation. They're trying to genre classify things that don't matter as much anymore. Maybe it needs overhaul, or maybe it needs to just go away. I don't know, one of the two. But I know we like Judges Week because it lets us, kind of get out ahead of E3 and see some stuff, beforehand, so we kind of know what's coming. But I don't know if that necessarily justifies the continued existence of giving a best award to games that are not done, or even a show where there just aren't that many games.
Yeah, well, given what's happening over at Game Trailers, maybe none of that stuff will exist next year.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Do you think maybe Keighley would try to keep that going on his own? Whether or not he was a part of that organization. I mean, he's still there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we might be getting into too inside baseball at this point.
Fair enough.
Let's see. We got to wrap it up because I have to go to the doctor in a second. Crytek seems like it's on fire.
That's not good.
Things are going well. There's all sorts of reports flying around in multiple outlets. If you try and pull one piece of information out of it, it just seems to be that Crytek in general seems to be not doing well.
Right.
And who knows what that means for the many games they have in development. They've announced a lot of games in the last a month or so. They announced 2 before E3. Not games on the scale of a Crisis, but they're still developing Homefront: The Revolution, which you would maybe hope is in better shape because Deep Silver obviously would be funding some of that, but a lot of the bad stuff seems to be coming out of Crytek UK where that game's in development. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, it is a game more theoretically to their specialty. It's just a first-person shooter that is story-based. Like, it's not, and a lot of the stuff that was in those stories that I read was that a lot of their problems are the direct result of them chasing after trends and chasing after stuff that is not really in their overall wheelhouse, like the whole free-to-play stuff. And so maybe that gives some hope that Homefront is something that they can maybe put together a little bit better because it's something that is familiar to them. But at the same time, when you start hearing things like people's getting emails saying like don't talk to press about any of this because just don't. That's usually not a good sign that things are in good shape over there. That's a real red flag.
People like getting paid, as it turns out.
Yeah, it's funny what happens when your paycheck stops showing up. It worked out real well for 38 Studios when that started happening.
Oculus acquired Xbox 360 controller designers Carbon Design, which that's interesting. Oculus continues to acquire everything and anything. I don't know if that necessarily means that Carbon is going to be making a controller for the Oculus Rift. That seems like that might be slightly extreme. But who
Yeah.
knows? I mean, it doesn't seem like they're trying to create their own console, so a controller maybe might be a little much. But I wouldn't be surprised if those guys were working with Oculus on, you know, the Oculus looks kind of ugly.
It does.
It's not a great looking thing. So wouldn't shock me if they're trying to bring in, some folks that have made some good looking piece of hardware in the past and trying to help them out there. There also was like scuttlebutt about Oculus showing something they have not announced behind closed doors that maybe that's related to.
Could be.
As well.
Could be.
I'm excited about this. So I kind of fell off the Hearthstone train, but Curse of Naxxramas. I'm not
Yes.
sure if that's how you pronounce it.
That's close enough.
Hearthstone Adventure, their single-player campaign stuff that they're going to charge for, comes out next month, which I'm super excited for. I feel like that'll get me back in Hearthstone in a way that I want to.
I arguably don't care that much about the single player stuff. I'm more interested in new cards, new stuff to kind of throw into the mix, because I mean there are still plenty of cards I have not unlocked, but at the same time I do feel like I'm kind of starting to hit that wall of like, okay, I kind of run out of ways to augment strategy for any of these characters, so I'm kind of just doing the same shit over and over again. So the idea of more cards sounds great. The single player thing is like, okay, I mean, that could be cool. It could be great. I don't know. I've never seen it. But it's not like playing against the computer was really the thing that I enjoyed about that game,
Yep, that's true.
But new cards!
Yeah, new cards. And at least give me a reason to boot it up again. But
yeah.
I'm going to have to bring this shorter show to a close because I tried to go to the doctor yesterday, and then they told me, Patrick, your appointment's tomorrow. And I was like, can I get my $5 back for parking on the street? Nope.
The answer was no.
The answer was no. So I'm going to go be healthy, hopefully.
Go do that.
And then, what are you up to this weekend? Anything in particular?
Let's see. I'm going to go see Snowpiercer at some point, which I'm very much looking forward to.
You can watch that on VOD, so I might watch that this weekend at home.
Yeah, I think I might go to the theater. We'll see. One way or another, I'm going to watch it. Money in the Bank pay-per-view is on Sunday. I'm having a few people over to come watch some wrestling at my apartment. Surprisingly, there are a number of writers around here who are willing to come watch wrestling with me, which I'm excited about. Other than that, no, I'm going to play some more Shovel Knight. That's really all I got on my docket.
Yeah, I'm probably going to start. I keep wanting to say Valhalla Hearts. That's not what I want to say, though.
No, Valiant Hearts.
Valiant Hearts. I'll probably start that this weekend. So, well, we'll be back covering some of the stuff we couldn't get to today because it's a bit of a shorter show, and hopefully we'll have a chat. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe the whole site will be broken and on fire still on Monday, but probably not. There were some apologies made by the IT people. There's something wrong with, it sounds like, a data center that handles some stuff. So it's not even that our site's broken. It's something that our site is connected to that is broken, and I'm sure it'll get sorted out today. But Alex, I'll talk to you on Monday. Oh, no, continue, bro. Oh.